Anxiety is a natural part of our lives, but when does it become something more dangerous, affecting our daily lives? Have you ever wondered, am I just experiencing normal anxiety, or am I dealing with a real anxiety disorder? Symptoms like a racing heart, constant unease, and fear could be signs of a bigger issue that you need to understand. But how can you tell the difference between normal anxiety and a serious anxiety disorder? This can be tricky, but it's not impossible to address. Imagine if you could control your fear and not let it dominate your life. In this video, I will share 5 simple, effective ways to manage anxiety right at home. Want to find out what they are? You're helpful for managing it. Don't miss the end of the video, the most important part you can't afford to skip if you truly want to regain peace of mind. Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're tackling something I think we can all relate to: anxiety.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But we're going beyond just, the surface level stuff. We're going deep with insights from, hold on, let me check my notes. Yeah, medical experts really getting into what anxiety actually and get this, how it can actually be a good thing.
Right.
And of course, how to tell if it's, becoming a problem. Plus some practical tips we can all use.
Absolutely. And one thing that might surprise people is that in the medical world, we don't view anxiety as entirely negative.
Really?
It's more nuanced than that.
Huh. I always thought anxiety equals bad. Full stop. Why would doctors see it as a positive?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine you've got a big presentation coming up. If you had zero anxiety about it,
okay,
would you really prepare?
Good point. So there's a good level of anxiety?
There's a sweet spot. There's this model. It's called the inverted U-shape model.
Inverted U-shape. Okay, break that down for me I've never heard of it.
Okay, so picture a U, but flipped upside down.
Right.
On one side, you've got very low anxiety. You might just lack any motivation at all.
Yeah.
On the other side is very high anxiety, and you're just paralyzed, frozen by fear.
Right.
But at the top of that upside down U, there's a level of anxiety that actually makes you perform better.
So it's like that nervous energy you get before a game or, a performance. It kind of pumps you up.
Yeah, exactly. There's even research on this, like musicians. They actually play better with a bit of pre-performance anxiety. Their technique is sharper, their interpretation is, more intense. Too little, and they might not really be engaged. Too much, and they might, fumble the notes.
So how do we know where we are on that U? Is it just a feeling? Or are there signs that it's too much?
Yeah.
That it's gone from helpful to harmful?
That's where we have to talk about the difference between just normal worry and an actual anxiety disorder. Because it's not just about how intense that feeling is, it's how much it affects your life.
So it's not just the feeling itself, it's what it makes me do. Or not do.
Exactly. So let's say you get offered a promotion at work.
Okay.
But it means, giving presentations, which you're terrified of.
Right.
If that fear is so bad that you turn down the promotion,
okay,
that's a sign that the anxiety is kind of running your life in a way that's, not healthy.
That's a pretty clear example. But what about where does this anxiety come from? Are we just born anxious or is it something we learn?
It's both.
Okay.
It's this mix of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
We know for sure there are certain genes that make someone more prone to anxiety.
Okay.
And those genes affect how our brains use things called neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
Serotonin, dopamine.
Right. Those brain chemicals, right. What do they actually do to anxiety?
Well, serotonin, think of it as a mood regulator. It keeps us feeling, calm and content.
Okay.
If you're low on serotonin, you're more prone to anxiety.
So if someone's genes mean they don't make enough of these chemicals, they're kind of starting off at a disadvantage.
That's part of it. But environment matters a lot, too. If you grew up in a home where anxiety was, the norm,
right,
you're more likely to develop those patterns, even with normal genes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We learn how to react to things from our families.
Right, yeah.
But I always thought if you were prone to anxiety, you would show up when you're a kid.
It doesn't always.
Really?
The average age for generalized anxiety disorder to actually show up is around 30.
30, wow. I wouldn't have guessed that. Why so late for some people?
Well, think about what's happening in our lives around that age. careers, relationships, maybe kids, finances are more complicated.
Yeah.
It's prime time for stress, right?
Okay. Yeah, I could see how that could be a trigger.
And this is where it's helpful to understand something called rumination. Yeah, it's that thing where you get stuck in these like cycles of negative thought.
Oh, I know all about that.
Yeah. You replay worries over and over, the what if spiral.
The what ifs. Yep.
And the thing is, rumination doesn't just happen with anxiety. It's linked to depression, too. So it shows how connected, all of our mental health stuff is.
Okay, so we've got this potential for anxiety, maybe from our biology, maybe from how we were raised.
Mm-hmm.
And then life throws all this extra stuff at us in our 30s. It's kind of starting to sound bleak, to be honest.
It's complicated, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the good news is understanding all that is the first step to managing it. And even if you do have a tendency towards anxiety, there are things you can do about it.
Okay, good. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
But before we get into the tips and tricks, there's one thing that the experts said that really surprised me.
Okay.
It's the idea that, like, modern life, all those conveniences that are supposed to make things easier might actually be making us more anxious.
It's a paradox, isn't it? We've designed our lives for comfort, for control, online shopping, food delivery, instant communication. It gives us this feeling of, efficiency, certainty.
But the experts are saying this might be backfiring on us.
Yeah, it's a possibility to consider. See, all that convenience,
Yeah.
It can lead to isolation. We're spending less time actually interacting with people, less time dealing with unexpected stuff.
So we're trading real-world resilience for the illusion of control in the digital world.
That's a good way to put it. And then when things inevitably go wrong.
Which they always do.
Right, when they do, we're less equipped to handle it emotionally.
It makes you wonder, are we making the world easier, or are we actually making ourselves more anxious by trying to make it easier?
It's a question worth thinking about. And here's the big thing that experts emphasized. We have a right to be anxious.
Well, right. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's pushing back against this idea that we have to be happy all the time, stress-free. Life is full of challenges, and it's normal to feel anxious sometimes.
So it's okay to not be okay all the time. That's actually kind of reassuring.
Absolutely. Trying to, deny those feelings or suppress them, it often just makes them stronger. What's important is finding healthy ways to, process them.
To deal with them.
Yeah.
This brings up another thing that the experts talked about that really surprised me.
What's that?
They said that people with more wealth, more resources,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they experience more anxiety.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive.
It does.
But it goes back to that illusion of control we were talking about. When you have a lot of resources, you might start to believe you can control everything.
And then when you realize you can't,
Right.
that could lead to even more anxiety.
Exactly. The gap between that expectation and reality, it can be really hard to deal with.
So it's like the more you try to control, the more anxious you get when you realize you can't control everything.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us back to, the importance of accepting uncertainty, being flexible. That's key to managing anxiety over the long term.
So it's not about getting rid of anxiety completely. It's more about learning to live with it in a healthy way.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding that sweet spot on that inverted U,
Right.
where anxiety is actually giving you energy, motivating you, not holding you back.
Okay, so we've talked about,
Yeah.
what anxiety is,
Yeah.
the difference between normal worry and a disorder, and some of these surprising things that contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm ready for the practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can we actually do about it?
Well, that's where the experts' 5 practical tips come in.
Okay, let's hear 'em.
And the good news is these are things anyone can start doing right away. They're very simple.
Perfect.
So the first one is called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Okay.
It's all about using your senses to anchor yourself in the present moment when you feel that anxiety spiraling.
I like that. How does it work?
It's super simple. You start by noticing 5 things you can see around you.
Okay.
Really focus on the details, the color of a book, the pattern on a rug, the shapes of the clouds outside.
All right, I'm with you so far.
Then you move on to 4 things you can touch.
Okay.
Feel the texture of your clothes, the coolness of a window, the weight of a pen in your hand.
I actually feel calmer already just thinking about it.
And then it's 3 things you can hear.
Okay.
The hum of the computer, birds chirping, even just the sound of your own breathing.
Right, and then,
2 things you can smell.
okay.
Maybe a candle or your coffee. Or even just fresh air.
And finally,
1 thing you can taste.
a piece of gum.
Yeah, gum. A sip of water. even just the taste in your mouth.
That's like a mini meditation
Yeah.
for your senses. I love it.
And you can do it anywhere, anytime. It's so easy.
Yeah.
It's just a quick way to stop those anxious thoughts and bring you back to right now.
Okay, I am adding that to my anxiety toolkit.
Okay.
What's number 2?
Tip number 2 is all about the power of your breath, specifically something called diaphragmatic breathing.
I've tried deep breathing before, but I'm not sure I'm, doing it right.
Well, the key is to engage your diaphragm, which is the muscle that sits below your lungs.
Right.
So find a comfortable position, either sitting or lying down. Place one hand on your chest and the other on your abdomen, just below your rib cage.
Okay, got it.
Now inhale slowly and deeply through your nose and focus on expanding your belly like you're filling a balloon. That hand on your abdomen should rise while the one on your chest stays pretty much still.
So it's like belly breathing, not chest breathing. I think I was doing it wrong.
It's a common mistake. Then you hold your breath for a few seconds and exhale slowly through your mouth, feeling your belly go back down.
How many breaths how many should I aim for?
Even just a few minutes can make a difference. Try starting with maybe 5 to 10 rounds. Focus on those slow, deep breaths in and even slower breaths out.
Okay, deep breathing, check. What's tip number 3?
That was a good explanation of the breathing. It's so simple, but it really works.
Yeah.
All right, so tip number 3. This one is about dealing with those negative thoughts, the ones that make anxiety worse.
It's called reframing.
Reframe it. I like the sound of that already. I have a lot of those negative thoughts. Like, how does that work?
So it's about challenging those thoughts that just, automatically pop into your head.
Mhm.
And instead of just accepting them, you try to see things from a more balanced perspective.
So instead of just assuming those I'm going to fail thoughts are true, I got to kind of put them on trial.
Exactly. So let's say you're about to go on a date.
Okay.
And you think, they're not going to like me.
Yeah.
Instead of just spiraling with that thought, you ask yourself, wait, what evidence do I actually have for that?
Right.
Is this based on anything real, or am I just, catastrophizing?
I bet most of the time it's the catastrophizing. Right. And once you start questioning those thoughts, you can start replacing them with something more positive, but still realistic. Like instead of they're not going to like me, you could say, well, I'm going to try my best and just enjoy getting to know this person.
Right.
Even if we don't end up, romantically involved, it's still a chance to connect with someone new.
It's like instead of beating myself up, I'm being my own cheerleader.
Yeah. But I get it. Sometimes those thoughts are really stuck in there.
Yeah, they are.
That's where tip number 4 comes in. This one is about setting small, achievable goals,
Okay.
because this can help so much with anxiety. Instead of having this huge goal that feels impossible, you break it down.
Oh, I am all about baby steps. Can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say you want to start exercising regularly,
Okay.
but the thought of, going to the gym every day,
Yeah.
that feels overwhelming. So instead, break it down. Maybe start with a 15-minute walk 3 times a week.
Okay, that feels more doable.
Exactly. And then the key is to celebrate those small wins.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you do that walk, give yourself credit for taking a step towards that bigger goal.
Little goals, big rewards. I like it.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about tip number 5?
This one is about recognizing when maybe you need more help.
Okay.
When doing these things on your own just isn't enough.
Seeking professional help.
Yeah.
It can be hard to know when to do that. Like, what are some signs? When is it time to get professional help?
Well, if you've been trying these things and the anxiety is still really affecting your life,
Okay.
like it's messing with your work, your relationships, your overall well-being,
Right.
that's a good time to talk to someone, a mental health professional.
There are so many different kinds of therapy out there. What are some of the most effective ones for anxiety?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Okay.
It's one of the most common and, well-researched therapies.
I've heard of CBT, but I'm not really sure what it is. What actually happens in CBT?
So basically, you work with a therapist to really look at your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and how they're all connected.
Mm.
You learn how to identify and challenge those negative thought patterns.
Well,
You develop ways to handle situations that trigger anxiety. And you gradually expose yourself to the things you're afraid of, but in a safe way.
so it's like getting a whole toolbox of strategies.
Yeah. And then there's another approach called exposure therapy.
Okay.
This one's especially good for, phobias or social anxiety. It's all about gradually exposing yourself to the things that make you anxious, starting with small stuff and working your way up.
So you learn that those situations aren't actually as scary as your anxiety is making them out to be.
Right.
And then there's, of course, medication.
Yeah, medications like SSRIs can be really helpful for some people. They can reduce anxiety symptoms. But it's really important to talk to your doctor about, the risks and benefits. And usually medication works best when it's combined with therapy.
So the big takeaway here is, if you're struggling, don't keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Get help.
Absolutely. There are people who can help you. They can give you support and guidance.
You mentioned that the experts have like a whole course on managing emotions. We'll be getting into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, I'm excited to share some of the highlights from that. It really gets into like the nitty-gritty of how to handle your emotions.
Okay.
And there were some really unique perspectives that you don't always hear in, typical self-help stuff.
So what were some of the things that stood out to you from that course?
One of the modules that I thought was really cool was about something called cognitive diffusion techniques.
Talking about what?
Diffusion.
Okay.
It sounds fancy, but it's basically about learning to, detach from your thoughts
Okay.
and see them for what they are. Just thoughts, not necessarily true.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I get it. Can you give me an example?
Okay, so imagine you're feeling anxious about a job interview. You might have that thought, I'm going to blow this. They're never going to hire me.
Mm-hmm.
With cognitive diffusion, instead of getting caught up in that thought and believing it, you could say to yourself, oh, there's that thought again. I'm having the thought that I'm going to blow the interview.
That's interesting, just changing the way you say it. How does that help?
It creates a little distance between you and the thought.
Okay.
It helps you to see that you are not your thoughts.
Mhm.
You're just observing them.
So it's like I'm stepping back and saying, okay, anxiety, I see you, but you're not in control.
Exactly. It's like thoughts are just these mental events, like
Okay.
clouds passing by. You don't have to believe them or let them, sweep you away.
There are like specific techniques to practice this, right?
Yeah, they have some really practical tools. One is labeling your thoughts, like I just said. Another one I like is the cloud visualization.
Cloud visualization.
Yeah.
What's that?
You close your eyes and you imagine your thoughts are clouds, just floating by in the sky.
Okay.
And you just watch them, no judging, just noticing their shapes, their colors, how they move. But you don't try to, hold on to them.
Kind of like watching the weather.
Yeah,
You don't try to stop the rain or make the sun come out.
exactly. And as you practice this, you start to realize you have a choice
Okay.
in how you react to your thoughts. You don't have to let them, control how you feel or what you do.
That's powerful. So what else was in the course?
Another module that was really good was on mindfulness.
Ah, mindfulness. It's so popular these days. And I get why.
Yeah.
I try to do it, but I'm not always very good at it. Like, I get distracted.
Well, what I liked about this course is that they make it really, easy to understand. They have clear instructions for, how to actually do it.
Like what kind of practices?
All kinds.
Yeah.
Breathing exercises, body scan meditations, mindful walking. They even have guided meditation.
Oh, yeah. Guided medications are good.
Yeah. Especially when you're just starting out.
It's like having a coach.
Yeah, exactly. And then they go even deeper into something called core belief work.
Core beliefs.
So those are the fundamental assumptions we have about ourselves, the world, other people.
Okay.
They usually develop, when we're kids, based on our early experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And they can really affect how we see ourselves, how we navigate the world.
So, for example, if someone grows up believing they're not good enough or not worthy of love,
Right.
that could mess with them in adulthood, make them anxious, make them sabotage themselves, make it hard to have healthy relationships.
Exactly. Those beliefs can become, self-fulfilling prophecies if you're not aware of them.
So how do you actually work with those core beliefs
Yeah.
to manage anxiety?
They guide you through a process of, identifying those beliefs, seeing if they're actually true, and then trying to replace them with beliefs that are more helpful.
That sounds really powerful.
It is.
But I imagine it could be really hard to change those beliefs.
Yeah, it can be, which is why they emphasize self-compassion,
So compassion.
being kind to yourself.
Right. That's as important, especially when you're dealing with anxiety. It's so easy to blame yourself.
Absolutely. But the course really encourages you to be understanding with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Everyone struggles. You got to treat yourself like you would treat a good friend.
It's like being your own best friend.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can really make a difference in how you manage anxiety and in living a more fulfilling life.
So this course, it sounds like it's really about giving people the tools to to take control of their emotions and actually make lasting changes.
It is. It's about helping people understand their inner world and realizing that, we might not be able to get rid of anxiety completely, but we can learn to manage it so it doesn't run our lives.
One thing that's helped me with anxiety is this idea of like facing your fears head on.
That's a big part of what the experts talk about. They say that avoiding the things that make us anxious actually makes the anxiety stronger over time.
Right. It's like you're feeding the monster.
Exactly. But when we choose to face our fears, even if it's just a little bit at a time, it sends a different message to our brain. We're showing ourselves that those situations aren't as dangerous as we think.
It's like that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. But I know, sometimes that's easier said than done.
It is.
That's why it's important to start small and to have people supporting you, a therapist, a friend, family, people who can encourage you and, keep you accountable.
The experts made a really interesting analogy for anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
They said it's like a smoke detector.
Oh, I love that one.
They talked about how a smoke detector is there to warn us about danger.
Right.
But sometimes it goes off when there's like just burnt toast.
Exactly.
It's the same with our anxiety. Sometimes it's warning us about a real threat, but sometimes it's just overreacting to something that's, not actually a big deal.
It is. So the question is, how do we learn to tell the difference?
Yeah. How do we know when it's a real threat versus a false alarm?
That's where those observation skills we were talking about come in.
Okay.
It's about becoming like a detective of your own emotions.
Interesting.
Noticing the physical feelings, labeling your thoughts, and just being aware without judging.
So I'm taking a step back and saying, okay, anxiety, I see you, I feel you, but you're not in charge.
Exactly. And then, after you've observed those feelings and thoughts, you can move on to the next phase, which is exploration.
Exploration.
Yeah. You start asking yourself some questions like, is this a real threat? Or is my anxiety being dramatic? What evidence do I have for this fear? What's the worst that could happen? And how likely is it that that will actually happen?
So it's about like fact-checking those anxious thoughts.
Right. And then it's about figuring out what you can control in the situation and choosing to do things that are, in line with your values.
So let's say I'm anxious about giving a presentation. I might not be able to control those butterflies in my stomach.
Right.
But I can control how prepared I am.
Exactly. You can practice, visualize yourself doing well, focus on the value you're bringing to your audience.
And that feeling of being in control, that can actually help with the anxiety.
It can. It's about going from feeling powerless to feeling empowered.
Yeah.
And that's what helps us live a better life, even with anxiety.
That's a great point.
One of the experts said something that really stuck with me. They said, even if anxiety doesn't completely disappear, we can still live a meaningful life if we act in line with our values.
Okay.
Choosing connection over isolation, engagement over avoidance, and growth over stagnation.
Wow, that's beautiful. It reminds us that we don't have to let anxiety make our choices for us.
We don't. We can choose to live a life that has meaning, purpose, connection, even if we still have anxiety.
And sometimes choosing to be brave, choosing to live according to our values, that might be the best way to deal with anxiety.
It might be.
That's a really good quote. It's encouraging. But I want to get back to the practical stuff for a minute.
Okay.
The actual tips the experts gave. We talked about them a little, but didn't really get into how to do them.
You're right. We still have those 5 actionable tips to go over.
Right.
And remember, they're all designed to be really simple, even if you've, never tried anything like this before.
Okay, good. So remind me, what was the first one again?
That was the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Right. But can we walk through it again just to make sure I understand exactly how to do it?
Of course. So it's all about bringing yourself back to the present moment. When you feel anxiety, starting to get out of control. And you do that by focusing on your 5 senses.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. So
Yeah.
5 things I can see. What kinds of things?
Anything. Just look around you. The color of the curtains, the texture of a plant's leaves, the shape of a picture frame, whatever catches your eye.
And that helps because
Because you're taking your attention away from those thoughts in your head.
Yeah.
And you're focusing on the physical world, what's actually around you right now.
Okay, so I find 5 things I can see. What's next?
Then you go to your sense of touch. Find 4 things you can physically feel. The
Yeah.
softness of your shirt, the coolness of a metal doorknob, the rug under your feet.
It's like I'm taking stock of my environment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a powerful way to break the cycle of those anxious thoughts. Okay, then what can you hear? 3 things.
The hum of the refrigerator, a car driving by outside.
Hmm.
Oh, and my own breathing.
Right.
It's funny, you don't always notice those everyday sounds.
You get used to them.
Hmm.
All right, now 2 things you can smell.
Okay, my tea. And I think I can smell the laundry that someone just put away.
Nice.
What's the last one?
The last one is taste. Find one thing you can taste.
Okay. I have a mint in my pocket.
Perfect. It could be a mint, coffee, even just the taste in your mouth.
Wow. That was kind of nice, like a little mental break.
It is. It's amazing how much our senses can affect us, how they can bring us back to the present moment. That's the whole idea behind the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique.
All right, that was number 1. What about number 2?
Tip number 2 is all about using your breath. Diaphragmatic breathing.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I try deep breathing, I actually feel more anxious.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Am I doing something wrong?
You might not be using your diaphragm correctly. Let's go through it step by step. So, find a comfortable position, sitting or lying down. Put one hand on your chest and the other on your belly, just below your ribs.
Okay, hands are in place. Now what?
Now breathe in slowly and deeply through your nose. Imagine you're filling up your belly with air, like a balloon.
Okay.
The hand on your belly should rise. The hand on your chest shouldn't really move.
So it's belly breathing,
Ah!
not chest breathing. I think that's where I was messing up.
A lot of people do that. Okay, so now hold your breath for a few seconds and exhale slowly through your mouth. Feel your belly go down.
How long should I do this for?
Even just a few minutes can make a big difference. Start with maybe 5 to 10 breaths. And remember, slow in, even slower out.
Okay, I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
What's tip number 3?
Number 3 is about changing those negative thoughts, the ones that, feed anxiety.
Right. I definitely want to get better at that. Tell me more about how to do it.
It's all about becoming aware of those thoughts as they pop up. And then you got to question them. Don't just assume they're true.
Okay.
Like imagine you're getting ready for a presentation and you have the thought, I'm going to mess this up.
Yeah, classic.
Instead of letting that thought take over, ask yourself, wait, what evidence do I have for that? Have I prepared? Have I practiced? Do I have a history of totally bombing presentations?
Probably not.
Right. So once you've challenged that thought, you can start to replace it with something more, realistic.
So I could say, okay, I've prepared. And even if I do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. I can handle it.
Exactly. You're switching from being your own worst critic to being your own best advocate.
Love it. Okay, what about tip number 4?
Tip number 4 is about breaking down those big, overwhelming goals, the ones that can make you feel, totally paralyzed.
Right.
So instead, you set small, achievable goals.
Oh, yeah, breaking things down into baby steps. Big fan of that. How does that apply to anxiety?
Well, let's say you're stressed out about a project at work. Instead of thinking about the whole thing, which can feel impossible,
Right.
just focus on one small task at a time.
Okay.
So instead of, I have to finish this whole report by Friday, it's, okay, today I'm going to focus on writing the introduction.
Right, so it's more manageable.
Exactly. And then you set realistic deadlines for each of those small tasks,
Yeah.
and you celebrate your wins along the way.
Little wins to get to the big win. Okay, I like it. So what's the last tip?
The last one is, knowing when to get help.
Seeking professional help.
Yeah.
It can be hard to admit that you need more than just, self-help.
Yeah.
So what are some signs that it might be time to talk to a professional?
If you've been trying these things and you're still feeling really anxious and it's affecting your life, your work, your relationships, just your ability to, enjoy things,
Right.
that's probably a good time to reach out.
What are some good, ways to find a therapist?
Well, you can always ask your doctor. They can give you referrals. There are also online directories like Psychology Today, Good Therapy.
Okay. It can feel scary to take that step.
Yeah, I know.
But it's important to remember there's no shame in asking for help. It actually takes a lot of strength to do that.
It does. It's an investment in yourself.
So those are the 5 tips.
5 actionable tips for dealing with anxiety.
From, grounding techniques to getting professional help.
And remember, anxiety is complicated. And what works for one person might not work for someone else. It's about finding what works for you.
Right. And building your own personal toolkit.
Yep.
And let's not forget that really powerful quote from earlier. Even if we don't get rid of anxiety completely, we can still have a good life. We just have to make choices that are in line with our values.
Choosing connection over isolation.
Right.
Engagement over avoidance. growth over stagnation.
It's a good reminder that we have the power to choose. We don't have to let anxiety control us.
We don't.
Well, we hope this deep dive into anxiety has been helpful. And if you're struggling, please remember that you're not alone. There's help out there.
And as always, we encourage you to, keep exploring these ideas, try out these techniques, keep learning about yourself and your own journey with anxiety.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. See you next time.